Admiral Reina Torres had seen many strange things during her tenure as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, but nothing quite prepared her for this moment. She stood before the Council's Grand Chamber, trying desperately to maintain her composure as first speaker Zilnax, a towering crystalline being, read the official complaint against humanity. The species known as humans has deployed an unknown psychological warfare agent designated as Laughter across 17 diplomatic missions. Zilnax's harmonics resonated through the chamber. This weapon appears to cause uncontrolled facial spasms, respiratory irregularities, and in severe cases, total loss of postural control. Reina bit her lower lip, hard. She couldn't laugh. Not now. Not when humanity's standing in the galaxy was at stake. But gods, this was ridiculous. Furthermore, Zilnax continued, crystal facets gleaming under the chamber's lights, humans appear to be spreading this weapon through what they call jokes, linguistic viral packets designed to trigger the laughter response in others. Behind her, Reina heard a distinct snort from her second-in-command, Commander Jackson Wells. She shot him a warning glare, but her own eyes were twinkling with barely suppressed mirth. The chamber, filled with representatives from over 300 species, buzzed with concerned murmurs. The Vandari delegation, with their multiple eye stalks, all swiveled toward the human contingent. The Hrothka, massive beings of living stone, shifted uncomfortably in their reinforced seats. Would the human representative care to explain this weapon? Zilnax's tone carried the weight of centuries of diplomatic authority. Reina stepped forward, her dress uniform crisp and perfect. Honorable First Speaker, members of the Council, there appears to be a significant misunderstanding. Laughter is not a weapon. It's a natural human response to. She paused, searching for the right words. How do you explain humor to species that had evolved without it? To situations that subvert our expectations in harmless ways, she finished. You claim it's not a weapon, came a gravelly voice from the Hrothka delegation, yet we have documented evidence of humans using this laughter to destabilize serious negotiations. During the Proxima Trade Summit, Ambassador Wells here, they gestured to Jackson, deployed a joke that caused 3 junior delegates to require medical attention due to respiratory distress. Jackson stepped forward. With respect, they laughed because I tripped over my own feet and said, I guess I'm falling for your trade proposals. It was just wordplay. Exactly, the Hrothka representative boomed. Weaponized linguistics. Reina closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she opened them, she noticed something interesting. The Arcturian representative, Dr. Vress, was watching the proceedings with an expression she'd learned to recognize as their species' version of amusement. Perhaps, Vressa's melodious voice cut through the chamber, we should consider that we're approaching this from the wrong angle. In my studies of human physiology, I've noted that this laughter response appears to serve a crucial biological function. What function could possibly justify such a disruption of diplomatic protocol? Zilnax demanded. Survival, Reina said firmly, seizing the opening Vress had provided. Laughter helps us cope with stress, build social bonds, and most importantly, helps us think creatively in crisis situations. You laugh in crises? The Vandari representatives' eye stalks all curved in shock. When danger threatens, you respond with this convulsive behavior? Sometimes, Reina admitted. It helps us think outside the box. Ah yes, Zilnax intoned, the infamous human box. Another weapon, perhaps? This time, Reina couldn't help it. A small chuckle escaped her lips, causing several delegates to flinch and one Vandari to extend their protective membrane. I apologize, she said quickly, but this perfectly illustrates my point. The ability to find humor in tense situations is part of what makes humans resilient. When we laugh, we're not attacking, we're adapting. A convenient claim, the Hrothka rumbled. Yet we note that humans are the only species to exhibit this behavior. In all our centuries of galactic cooperation, no other species has developed such a destabilizing trait. Maybe that's exactly why you should be studying it rather than fearing it, Jackson suggested. After all, humans have solved several supposedly unsolvable crises in the past decade alone. Has it occurred to anyone that our ability to laugh might be connected to our ability to find unexpected solutions? The chamber fell silent as the delegates considered this. Reyna noticed Vress nodding slightly, their luminescent patterns shifting in what she recognized as their equivalent of scholarly interest. The council requires time to deliberate on this matter, Zilnax announced finally. Until we reach a decision, all human diplomatic personnel are required to register their capacity for laughter as a potential influential ability in all formal proceedings. As they left the chamber, Jackson leaned close to Reyna. So we have to warn people that we might find things funny? That's... Don't say it, Reyna warned, but she was fighting a smile. Laughable? This time, both of them had to stop walking as they dissolved into quiet laughter, causing a passing group of Vandari to hurriedly extend their protective membranes and scuttle away. You know, Reyna said once she'd composed herself, this could actually be serious. If they classify laughter as a weapon, then humanity's greatest defense mechanism becomes our biggest diplomatic liability, Jackson finished, suddenly serious. The question is, how do we prove to a galaxy of non-laughing species that humor isn't a threat? Reyna watched the retreating forms of the council members, each species moving according to their own unique biology, each carrying their own evolutionary history that had somehow never included the development of laughter. Maybe, she said slowly, we need to make them understand why we laugh. Not just what it is, but why it's essential to who we are. And how exactly do we do that? Reyna smiled, an expression that would have sent half the council diving for cover. We do what humans do best, Jackson. We adapt, we improvise, and if necessary, we make them laugh. God help us all if we succeed. The emergency session of the Galactic Security Committee wasn't going well. First speaker Zilnax's crystalline form pulsed with agitation as reports from across the galaxy scrolled through the holographic display. 17 incidents of unauthorized human laughter in the Orion diplomatic sector, a Vandari analyst reported, I stock swaying nervously. 3 cases resulted in complete breakdown of trade negotiations when Centaurian delegates fled the chamber. Not to mention, rumbled Ambassador Kthok of the Hrothka, the incident at the Scientific Exchange Summit where a human researcher allegedly deployed a pun during a presentation on quantum mechanics. Dr. Vress, the Arcturian scientist who had spoken in humanity's defense, interfaced with the central data core. Their bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly as they processed the information. Fascinating, they commented. The humans appear to be completely unable to suppress this response, even when formally requested to do so. In her observation pod above the committee chamber, Admiral Torres watched the proceedings with growing concern. Beside her, Jackson was reviewing footage from the various incidents, his expression growing increasingly strained. They're really serious about this, aren't they? He whispered. Dead serious, Reyna replied, then winced at her choice of words. Which is exactly the problem. How do you explain joy to species that view any loss of control as a threat? Below, the committee continued their deliberations. A holographic map of known space highlighted areas of laughter contamination in pulsing red. The spread is concerning, Zilnax announced. We've received reports of non-human species beginning to exhibit similar symptoms after prolonged exposure to human diplomatic teams. This caught Reyna's attention. She leaned forward, studying the data more closely. Jackson, are you seeing this? He nodded, already pulling up the relevant files on his tablet. 3 cases of Arcturian scientists developing what they call spontaneous respiratory events after working with human researchers. And look at this, a young Vandari diplomat apparently attempted to replicate human laughter during a cultural exchange program. Successfully? According to the report, they managed something between a hiccup and a sneeze. Their family filed a formal complaint. In the chamber below, Dr. Vress was presenting their latest findings. Our neurological studies suggest that human laughter serves multiple functions beyond suspected psychological warfare. It appears to release specific neurotransmitters that enhance cognitive flexibility and social bonding. So it is a form of mind control, Kthok concluded triumphantly. That's not what Vress began, but was interrupted by a priority alert that flashed across all screens. Reyna's communication implant buzzed simultaneously. She opened the message and felt her blood freeze. Oh no! What is it? Jackson asked, but before she could answer, Zilnax was already announcing it to the chamber. We have confirmed reports of a human diplomatic vessel approaching the Nexian archive world. The first speaker's harmonics trembled with concern. They are requesting emergency landing clearance due to critical system failures. The chamber erupted in chaos. The Nexian archives were the galaxy's oldest repository of knowledge, maintained by a species so serious about their duty that they had engineered all capacity for emotional display out of their genetics millennia ago. We cannot allow humans near the archives, Kthok declared. Their laughter could contaminate thousands of years of stored knowledge. That's ridiculous, Reyna muttered, but she understood the fear. The Nexians valued their emotional control above all else. The idea of humans, with their unpredictable laughter, anywhere near their precious archives would be terrifying to them. The vessel reports complete failure of their gravity stabilization system, Vress noted, scanning the incoming data. Without immediate landing clearance, they risk total structural failure. Better the loss of one human vessel than risking the contamination of the archives, a Nexian representative stated flatly. Reyna had heard enough. She stood, straightened her uniform, and strode toward the chamber's main floor, Jackson hurrying behind her. Admiral Torres, Zilnax acknowledged as she approached the central platform. This chamber is currently in closed session. With respect, first speaker, you're about to let 300 human diplomats die because you're afraid they might laugh at your books. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Even the Vandari's eye stalks froze in place. That is an oversimplification, the Nexian representative began. Is it? Reyna challenged. Because from where I stand, you're so terrified of a natural biological response that you're willing to ignore the most fundamental principle of galactic cooperation, the duty to aid ships in distress. The archives must be protected, the Nexian insisted. The archives, Reyna said carefully, contain the accumulated knowledge of thousands of species across millions of years, correct? Correct. And in all that knowledge, has any species ever found a better way to face crisis than humanity's ability to laugh in the face of death? Dr. Vressa's patterns shifted rapidly. She raises an interesting point. Our studies suggest that human laughter evolved specifically as a response to stress and danger. Perhaps, rather than a weapon. It's a survival mechanism, Jackson finished. One that's helped humanity overcome challenges that other species deemed impossible. Reyna noticed something interesting as she looked around the chamber. The younger delegates, particularly those who had more direct contact with humans, seemed less afraid and more curious. Some were even showing signs of what she recognized as their species' versions of thoughtful consideration. First speaker, she said formally, I propose a test. Allow the human vessel to land. Let the galaxy see whether our laughter truly threatens your knowledge, or whether it might actually add something valuable to it. The crystalline being's facets shifted through various colors as they considered. Finally, they spoke. Your proposal is either the height of wisdom or the depth of folly, Admiral Torres. Either way, it appears we have little choice. The vessel will be granted emergency landing clearance. As relieved sighs and worried murmurs filled the chamber, Reyna caught Jackson's eye. He was trying very hard not to smile. Don't you dare, she whispered. Wouldn't dream of it, he replied, his voice strained with suppressed laughter. But you have to admit, this whole situation is. If you say, hilarious, I'll have you assigned to diplomatic duty on the Hrothka homeworld. I was going to say, historically significant, he said innocently. Above them, the emergency alerts continued to flash as the human vessel began its descent toward the archives. The real test, Reyna knew, was just beginning. The landing bay of the Nexian archives was possibly the most somber place in the galaxy. Ancient knowledge crystals lined the walls, their surfaces etched with millions of years of accumulated wisdom. The air itself seemed heavy with the weight of history, which made the sound of human laughter echoing through the corridors all the more jarring. Report, Reyna demanded as she strode through the landing bay, trying to ignore the horrified expressions on the Nexian faces. Well, what passed for expressions on their carefully engineered neutral features? Lieutenant Kira Patel, the chief engineer from the damaged vessel, was trying very hard to maintain her professional demeanor. She wasn't entirely succeeding. "You're not going to believe this, Admiral," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed mirth. "The gravity stabilization failure? It was caused by a space hamster." Reyna blinked. "A what?" "One of the diplomatic pets got loose in the engineering section," Kira explained. "Apparently, it decided the main gravitational relay would make an excellent nest. The little fellow chewed through exactly the right combination of cables to create a cascading system failure." Behind them, a Nexian archivist made a sound that might have been a gasp, if they hadn't engineered gasping out of their species eons ago. A rodent, first speaker Zilnax's harmonics vibrated with disbelief. A rodent nearly caused an interstellar diplomatic crisis. To be fair, Jackson added, not helping at all, it was a very determined rodent. Dr. Vress, who had accompanied them to document the incident, was recording everything with barely concealed fascination. "Remarkable. The humans appear to be deriving genuine pleasure from a situation that could have resulted in their deaths." "That's because it's objectively funny," Kira said, then quickly added, "Sir," when she caught Reyna's warning look. The Nexian chief archivist, a tall, gray-skinned being named Vortheta, stepped forward. "We fail to see the humor in this situation. The archives were placed at risk because of insufficient human protocols regarding small mammals." "Oh come on," Jackson muttered. "Even you have to appreciate the irony. All that advanced technology, and we were nearly done in by a hamster looking for a warm place to sleep." Several of the human crew members lost their battle with composure at this point. Even Reyna felt her lips twitching. "Admiral Torres," Zilnax warned, "your species appears to be experiencing another mass outbreak of their condition." "Not an outbreak," Reyna corrected. "This is a perfect example of how humans use humor to process potentially traumatic events. Instead of being traumatized by their near-death experience, my crew is already adapting, learning, and yes, laughing about it." "Fascinating," Dr. Vressa's patterns pulsed rapidly. "A psychological defense mechanism that simultaneously promotes emotional recovery and problem-solving capability." "Speaking of problem-solving," Kira interjected, "we should probably mention that the hamster is still loose in the archive somewhere." The silence that followed this statement was absolute. "A contaminated rodent," Vortheta stated flatly, "is currently free to roam among the greatest collection of knowledge in known space." "Don't worry," Kira said brightly. "We have a plan." "Does this plan," Zilnax asked carefully, "involve more laughter?" "Almost certainly," Jackson admitted. What followed was perhaps the most undignified search operation in the history of the Nexian archives. Human crew members, armed with treats and small sonic attractors, crawled through maintenance tunnels and searched behind ancient data stacks. The Nexians watched in horror as centuries of protocol were ignored in favor of making small squeaking noises and rattling food containers. "Look at it this way," Jackson said to a particularly distressed archivist, "you're getting to document a completely unique event. Has anyone ever had to hamster-proof the archives before?" "The very fact that such a procedure is necessary," the archivist replied stiffly, is a damning indictment of human preparedness protocols. Or, Reyna suggested, it's a valuable lesson in expecting the unexpected. Something humans excel at, partly because we're able to find humor in chaos. Dr. Vress, who had been quiet for some time, suddenly spoke up. The human approach does seem to be yielding results. Observe. They all turned to see Kira emerging from behind a data stack, holding a very contented-looking hamster. The small creature was happily munching on a treat, apparently unaware of the diplomatic crisis it had caused. "Got him," Kira announced triumphantly. "And look what else we found." She held up a small crystal that had been knocked loose, its surface glowing with a faint blue light. This was stuck in an old ventilation shaft. Probably been there for centuries. Vortheta moved faster than Reyna would have thought possible for a Nexian. "That is impossible." "That is." They studied the crystal, their engineered composure cracking slightly. "This is the lost archive of the primordial songs. It has been missing for over 3,000 years. Reyna couldn't help herself. She laughed. Not because it was funny, exactly, but because it was so perfectly, ridiculously human. They had nearly caused an interstellar incident, violated countless protocols, and in the process of chasing a hamster, accidentally solved one of the galaxy's oldest archaeological mysteries. "You know," Jackson said thoughtfully, "there's probably a valuable lesson here about how sometimes you need chaos to find what order has overlooked." Dr. Vressa's patterns were practically strobing with excitement. "This requires further study. The correlation between human laughter, crisis response, and accidental discovery." "Perhaps," Zilnax interrupted, their crystalline form shifting colors rapidly, "we have been hasty in our judgment of human emotional responses." Reyna looked at the assembled beings, the bewildered Nexians, the fascinated Arcturian, the slowly adapting first speaker, and her own crew, still fighting back grins, and realized that something fundamental had shifted. "First speaker," she said formally, "I believe I now understand why humans developed laughter. It's not just about finding things funny. It's about finding possibility in the impossible, order in chaos, and hope in crisis. It's about—" She was interrupted by a small squeak. The hamster had somehow wriggled free of Kira's grasp and was making another bid for freedom, this time heading straight for Zilnax's crystalline form. "Oh no," Jackson said, but he was grinning. "Here we go again." And as the chase resumed, this time with the dignified first speaker reluctantly joining in, Reyna realized that perhaps this was exactly what the galaxy needed, a little bit of chaos, a lot of adaptation, and the courage to laugh in the face of the absurd. The Nexian archives would never be quite the same. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council took on a decidedly different tone this time. The lost archive of the primordial songs floated in a stasis field at the center of the chamber, its soft blue glow illuminating the faces of the assembled delegates. "Let me be certain I understand this sequence of events," first speaker Zilnax began, their crystalline form still showing traces of scuff marks from the hamster chase. "A human pet caused a near-catastrophic ship failure, forced an emergency landing at our most sacred repository of knowledge, and in the ensuing chaos, accidentally discovered one of the most significant lost artifacts in galactic history?" "That's pretty much it, yes," Reyna confirmed. She kept her face carefully neutral, though it was becoming easier with practice. Dr. Vress stepped forward, their bioluminescent patterns dancing with excitement. "The implications are extraordinary. My preliminary analysis suggests that human, chaos theory approaches to problem-solving may have applications we never considered." "You cannot be serious," Kthok of the Hrothgar rumbled. "Are you suggesting we should release rodents into other archaeological sites?" "Of course not," Vress replied. "I am suggesting that the human capacity for embracing disorder, and yes, finding humor in it, might represent an evolutionary advantage we have overlooked." The chamber erupted in overlapping discussions. Reyna noticed something interesting. the younger delegates, particularly those who had witnessed the hamster incident, were nodding thoughtfully. Even some of the Nexian archivists seemed less rigid than usual. A soft chime silenced the chamber. Vortheta, the chief archivist, had requested to speak. "We have analyzed the recovered archive," they announced. "It contains information about the predecessors that we believed lost forever. But more significantly," they paused, almost seeming to struggle with the concept, "we found it because we were forced to abandon our traditional search patterns." "Because you were chasing a hamster," Jackson clarified helpfully. "Yes," Vortheta acknowledged, managing to make the word sound both pained and enlightened. "The chaos of the situation required us to examine spaces we had previously dismissed as illogical storage locations." Reyna stepped forward. "Members of the Council, I believe we're looking at this all wrong. You've been treating human laughter as a disruption, a weapon, or at best a peculiar biological quirk. But what if it's actually a tool? A mechanism that evolved specifically to help us deal with the unexpected?" "Elaborate," Zilnax requested, their tone notably less hostile than in previous sessions. "Think about it," Reyna continued. "Every species here developed different evolutionary advantages. The Hrothka have their living stone bodies. The Vandari have their protective membranes. The Arcturians have their bioluminescent communication. Humans? We developed the ability to find humor in chaos. And this is an advantage?" Kthok asked, but their tone was curious rather than dismissive. "The hamster incident proves it," Jackson said. "When everything went wrong, what did humans do? We laughed, yes, but more importantly, we adapted. We didn't freeze up or panic. We saw the absurdity of the situation and worked with it." Dr. Vressa's patterns shifted to what Reyna had learned to recognize as their Eureka configuration. The missing element in our analysis. Human laughter isn't just an emotional response, it's a cognitive tool for processing and adapting to unexpected situations. A young Vandari delegate raised several eye stalks. "Is this why humans often solve problems that other species consider impossible? Because they can laugh at them?" "Partially," Reyna admitted. "When you can laugh at a problem, you stop being afraid of it. When you stop being afraid, you start seeing solutions that fear might have hidden." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Zilnax spoke. "We have received multiple requests from various scientific institutions to study this human approach. The Nexian archives have even proposed a new research wing dedicated to what they're calling chaos theory problem solving. With proper containment protocols for small mammals, I assume?" Jackson asked. Several delegates actually showed signs of amusement at this, a first in Council history. "Admiral Torres," Zilnax continued, "the Council finds itself in an unprecedented position. Your species' unique characteristic, which we initially perceived as a threat, may in fact be." They seemed to struggle with the words, "beneficial to galactic development." "Does this mean humans don't have to register their capacity for laughter as a potential influential ability?" Reyna asked hopefully. "Not exactly," Zilnax replied. "But perhaps we should reclassify it. Not as a weapon, but as a specialized problem-solving methodology." "That's actually pretty accurate," Reyna conceded. Additionally, Vortheta added, "the archives request human assistance in examining other areas that our traditional methods may have overlooked." "Without the hamsters this time," they added quickly. As the Council continued to debate the implications, Reyna felt a subtle shift in the chamber's atmosphere. The fear and suspicion that had previously greeted human laughter was being replaced by something else: curiosity, interest, and maybe even a hint of envy. "You realize what this means?" Jackson whispered to her. "They're not just tolerating human laughter anymore. They're actually starting to see its value." Reyna nodded, watching as Dr. Vress enthusiastically explained the neurological benefits of humor to a fascinated group of young delegates. Maybe that's been the problem all along. We've been trying to suppress our laughter to fit in, when we should have been helping them understand why we laugh in the first place. Does this mean I can finally tell my quantum mechanics joke to the Scientific Exchange Committee? Let's not push our luck, Raina advised, but she was smiling. In the center of the chamber, the recovered archive continued to glow, a testament to the unexpected ways in which chaos and order could work together. And somewhere in the vast halls of the Nexian archives, a small empty hamster cage stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from careful planning, but from embracing the beautiful absurdity of the universe. One standard galactic year after the infamous hamster incident, the Great Hall of Innovation on New Earth was packed with delegates from across known space. The occasion? The first-ever Galactic Symposium on Human Adaptive Responses, or as it had been unofficially dubbed, the Laughter Conference. Admiral Reina Torres stood at the podium, surveying the extraordinary scene before her. Nexian archivists sat beside Hrothka warriors, while Vandari diplomats mingled with Arcturian scientists. Most remarkably, many of them were attempting to smile. A year ago, she began, the galaxy viewed human laughter as a potential weapon. Today, we gather to study it as a tool for innovation and adaptation. But first, I believe Dr. Vress has some research findings to share. The Arcturian scientist floated to the podium, their bioluminescent patterns forming what Raina now recognized as their version of barely contained excitement. Our year-long study has yielded remarkable results, Vress announced. Species exposed to human laughter and humor-based problem-solving showed a 47% increase in creative solutions to complex problems. Even more fascinating, we've documented the emergence of laughter-like responses in several non-human species. A murmur ran through the crowd. On cue, a young Vandari diplomat demonstrated their species' newly developed laugh, a rhythmic waving of eye stalks accompanied by a soft whistling sound. The human delegates politely applauded, though Raina noticed Jackson covering his mouth to hide his grin. But perhaps most significant, Vress continued, is the discovery we made last month in the Nexian archives. Chief Archivist Vortheta, would you care to elaborate? Vortheta stepped forward, their traditionally neutral expression now bearing what could almost be called a hint of enthusiasm. In the deeper analysis of the Primordial Songs archive, they announced, we found something extraordinary. The predecessors, whom we long believed to be beings of pure logic and order, had their own version of laughter. They called it the chaos embrace, a neurological response that helped them process unexpected situations and find solutions in apparent disorder. The revelation sent a ripple through the audience. The predecessors, the mysterious ancient species whose technological achievements still weren't fully understood, had laughed? It appears, Vortheta continued, that somewhere in our species' various evolutionary paths, most of us lost this ability. All except humans, who not only retained it but developed it into a sophisticated survival tool. Raina stepped back to the podium. Which brings us to the real reason for this gathering. The Galactic Council has approved a new initiative, the integration of human adaptive responses into crisis management, or IHARCM. We're still working on the acronym, Jackson added, earning a few experimental chuckles from the audience. The initiative will pair human advisors with various galactic institutions, Raina explained. Not to teach other species to laugh exactly like humans do, but to help them rediscover their own versions of adaptive humor. Some species have already shown promising results, Vress added. The Hrothka have developed what they call stone rumbling, a form of appreciation for life's absurdities that manifests as subtle vibrations in their crystal matrix. Kthok demonstrated, their massive stone form emitting a low, pleasant hum that reminded Raina of distant thunder. The Nexian archives, Vortheta added, have created a new classification system that includes productive chaos factors in their research methodologies. We have even designated specific areas where traditional organizational patterns are deliberately disrupted to encourage new discoveries. Still no hamsters allowed, though, Jackson stage whispered, earning more practice chuckles from the audience. As Reina watched the various species attempting to share humor in their own unique ways, she realized something profound had changed. The galaxy hadn't just accepted human laughter, it had begun to remember its own capacity for joy. A year ago, she concluded, we faced a crisis because the galaxy feared what it didn't understand. Today, we're turning that fear into understanding, and that understanding into growth. Yes, humans laugh. We laugh because we understand that the universe is too vast and wonderful to be taken entirely seriously. We laugh because it helps us face the unknown with courage and creativity. And now, we invite you all to find your own way to laugh with us. The symposium ended with an unprecedented event, a multi-species attempt at collective appreciation of humor. It wasn't quite laughter as humans knew it, the Vandari whistled, the Hrothgar rumbled, the Arcturians pulsed with light, and the Nexians permitted themselves micro-expressions of amusement. But it was something new, something that bridged the vast gaps between their different evolutionary paths. Later, at the reception, Jackson found Reina watching a group of young delegates from various species sharing what appeared to be attempts at jokes. "You know what's really funny?" he asked. "What's that?" "We spent centuries trying to figure out what made humans special in the galaxy. Turns out, it was our ability to laugh at ourselves." Reina smiled, watching as a Hrothgar attempted to explain their version of a knock-knock joke to a fascinated group of Arcturians. "Maybe that's the real lesson here," she said. "Sometimes the things that make us different aren't flaws to be fixed or weapons to be feared. They're gifts to be shared." "Deep," Jackson nodded. "Very philosophical. Almost makes you forget this all started because of a hamster." And in the elegant hall of one of humanity's greatest achievements, surrounded by representatives of countless alien species all learning to find their own kind of joy in the absurd, Admiral Reina Torres did the most human thing possible. She laughed. The sound echoed through the hall, and one by one, in their own unique ways, the gathered species of the galaxy joined in. Not because they had to, but because they finally understood why humans had been laughing all along. The universe, after all, was full of wonders. And sometimes the only appropriate response to wonder was joy.